That didn't work. Trying to get it to be nice and level. There we go. Something was off. Maybe it's still off. Well, welcome back to the Stoic Dad. It's been a little bit. Just wanted to do a quick update early this morning. A lot has happened in the intervening month or so, but one of the main things is that I've overcome a lot of the frustration in the night helping with the baby. Now, more recently, that's really been helped by our son sleeping through the night. So, and then, that's one way to not suffer from anger anymore, is for the difficulty to go away. That can't be our general solution, though sometimes you can set things up in such a way that that's no longer an issue. If you know when you get angry and why, you can change the logistics, and that can be one of the pieces of a solution. If it's in your control, after all, that's part of Stoicism. But a lot of my anger has shifted towards my older son, who's 5. For our purposes, I was going to call him Linus. So we've got Linus, Lucy, and Woodstock. So, and that anger is a little bit more complex than just, I want to be asleep right now. It's hard to deal with an infant. That's more, I remember hitting and harming my younger sister when I was about his age. And when I see him do so, I get pretty enraged unless I have some perspective. So I've needed to grow in that area more, how to deal with toddlers. And one of the books that I've read recently is Hunt, Gather, Parent, which I plugged a little bit ago. And I've linked in the description below. It's been one of the most influential and just life-changing books that I've read. Not that it has, in one fell swoop, changed me, but over the course of a couple months now, and hope that continues, I've reset some of my habits and reactions. The basic gist of the book is that parents in Western countries are weird in that sense the sociologists talk about, of Western, educated, industrialized, I forget the rest, but that around the world, other cultures, there's been a universal way of parenting that had been passed down, and now it's been lost in the West. Everywhere, many other places, it's retained, apart from as Western influence comes and changes things. So it's a bit of a noble savage sort of perspective, but that has a long history in philosophy, and apparently it's accurate in the case of parenting. So what's been very exciting about that is a lot of how I've felt about toddlers appears to be part of weird parenting. Part of which is, I have to examine this, but that we take the idea of parenting so seriously, but then we make it too hard for ourselves, and we end up in these combative relationships with our kids. Whereas the ancient hunter-gatherer sort of way with kids, part of it assumed that you were just going about life and the kids were there. Parenting wasn't full child-centric focus on the kid. That's incompatible with doing, say, white-collar computer work that, my child can't sit alongside me as I write an essay, for example. It just doesn't really work. But there were specific techniques that are talked about in this book, ways that engage a kid's imagination, or that are just more sensitive to how children work. Some of them are as simple as, when a child has a tantrum, don't get in a battle with them. instead just ignore it and wait for it to pass. But also, the central portion of the book is about the Inuits and how they never become angry. And Michaeline Duclef, if I'm saying her name properly, who writes this book, is copying what a previous anthropologist wrote back in the 60s, never in anger, about the Inuits and their parenting. And it's very remarkable that that anthropologist went to the Inuits to study something else, like their spirituality. But what she noticed was their parenting. And so she wrote a whole book about that called Never in Anger, given that that's one of the things I think of as central to Stoicism. There's other negative emotions and passions that we're trying to avoid and overcome, but anger is pretty central, certainly for me. This is very informative, and what's most helpful is the idea of a different perspective about kids. To almost quote the book, if we view children as manipulative button pushers trying to mess with us, we'll be angry at them. But if we instead think of them as newbie, uninitiated citizens who don't really know how to interact in the social world and need to be trained, you get a different perspective on your kids. Even if my son whacks my daughter, I can bring down the hammer and say, if you were a grown-up, you'd go to jail for that sort of thing. But he's not a grown-up. So instead I could say, that's not how we react when someone takes our toy, and show them another way. But one of these crucial techniques is simply just to step back and observe when something's going wrong. You don't immediately have to intervene. And there's something incredible in your mind that happens when you do that. It's this perspective of observation. Already, to observe a child rather than to react is to have a different perspective on them. In some sense, it's just to have some perspective at all, as opposed to when you're in the grip of a passion and you can't see things for what they are. So I found that very helpful. I'm going to dig into more of the techniques, but that's a start. One of the last things I'll mention is the idea of just enjoying one's kids. It's one thing to be a Stoic dad. It'd be another, I think, say the next step to become an Epicurean dad, one who just enjoys life with children, and perhaps by regulating how much I'm with them and how much I'm apart from them. But I'm really hoping to move in that direction. And knowing your limits is pretty important for that. So that's on the horizon. But hey, there's an update. I'll post some short clips from this and try to get the message out about being a Stoic dad. Along the same lines, I heard from somebody recently about the Daily Dad podcast. So I'm going to go check that out. Little 4-minute clips each day about how to be a dad from Ryan Holiday, who runs the Daily Stoic. So I'm hoping to think and talk about things in that orbit. So I'm going to go check out the Daily Dad, and you can too. So bye for now. It's the Stoic Dad signing off.